Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Sunday for Sunday, March 7th, 2021. I'm going to be joined today by members of the media, academia, and financial services as we analyze all the news and information this week in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more. We've got another great show for you, so sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of BRN Sunday. Let's kick things off with a look at personal finance. And joining us on the line, she is a personal finance reporter for The Motley Fool. You can find her writing both on Motley Fool and millionacres.com. I'm talking about Ms. Mari Backman. Mari, great to talk to you as always. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
No problem, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
So, Mari, you know what they say is April showers bring Mayflowers. What do Mayflowers bring? And the answer is pilgrims. But we're coming up on spring. And I think you want to talk about spring cleaning your finances.
I do, Jeff, because we actually, up here on the East Coast, I live in New Jersey, we finally got a real spring-like day yesterday. It was in the low 50s all afternoon. It was sunny and pleasant, so it kind of got me thinking, spring cleaning, got to clean out that garage, got to clean out part of my basement. And, I always like to tell people that while you're doing the physical, spring cleaning around your house, it's time to also, take an hour or two out of your day, sit down and do some, financial cleaning as well.
I like that idea. I like that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there's really no hard and fast rule as to what that's going to entail, right? It's going to look different for everybody else. But here are a few basic things that I suggest looking at. I think it's just helpful for the average person to look at. Number one, your budget. So, first of all, I'll say that if you're not following a budget, sit down and start making up a budget and follow a budget. Unless you're really, earning so much more money than you could ever expect to spend, and you're really just, rocking every sort of savings goal you have, you probably should have a budget. So either sit down and create one, or maybe, a lot of people, Jeff, they put their budgets together at the start of the year. They think, okay, like, this is what my paycheck looks like, and this is what my spending is going to look like, so forth. And, at this point, we're a good 60 days into the year, a little bit more than that. And I think, a lot of people find that they put together a budget, but then as they actually start spending, they might realize, hey, wait a minute, like this thing's a little bit off. Like, I'm putting, so-and-so is what I spend on groceries, but I'm looking at my bills, and they're usually about $50 higher a month. I should probably adjust that. So it's not a bad idea to just sit down, give that budget a look, make sure it's accurate, maybe make some changes, and that'll help you kind of stay on track to make sure you're not overspending, make sure you're able to carve out enough money each month for your savings, and so forth.
Yeah, I think that, I think the better the more frequent you do it with, Mari, the better off you're going to be at year end. I think last time you were on, we talked about taxation. Didn't we talk about taxes, I think, the last 2 weeks ago? I'm pretty sure we talked about.
I know we did it recently, yeah.
Yeah. And, if you wait to the last minute to calculate, if you're a gig worker, if you're a full-time worker, if you wait to the last minute to do that, don't take everything into account. You got a lot of stuff that you have to do before tax time. I think the same thing applies with budget and your finances. If you do it in little small increments every 2 months or every quarter, if you want to align with your 401k plan or your retirement program, that's I think that's a good method to do that, and you don't have that much to undertake.
Right, exactly. So that's definitely, I'd say, item number one that you might want to tackle, during your spring cleaning. So the next item actually does have to do, to an extent, with physical cleaning. So I don't know about you, Jeff, but I get just tons of documents all the time, right? My brokerage account, they keep sending me these documents, even though I could have sworn I signed up for electronic communication only. And I still, we get pay stubs from my husband's job and just all these documents. And I'm pretty bad, Jeff. What I tend to do is kind of let it all pile up, and then about once a month, I just sit there, I go through everything, I shred the things with sensitive information. But as much as I procrastinate on going through some of that stuff, I know a lot of people really let that stuff gather to the point where they have months' worth of documents just sitting in a pile. So I would definitely recommend, first of all, I do recommend doing this on a monthly basis so it's not overwhelming. But if you've been neglecting all of that paperwork, take some time to just go through it First of all, you want to do that during the spring because the tax filing deadline is April 15th, and you never know when you might have a hidden tax form in that stack of papers.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people, they may not be so in tune to what a 1099 is, right? A 1099 is a form that basically summarizes any sort of, I'll call it side income that you get. And by side income, for lack of a better way to say it, what I'm really talking about is, if you earn some interest in your bank account, you're going to get a 1099 summarizing what that interest is. If you earned maybe some, dividend payments, you'll get a 1099, speaking to that. If you did a little bit of work on the side, maybe, you work full time, but you did a freelance web design project, and some client paid you $1,200 for it. That's going to be on a 1099. So some people, don't pay attention to those forms, not because they're trying to cheat the IRS. They just don't realize what they are. But any form that says 1099 on it, that is income you must report on your tax return. So I would definitely say now, go through those papers, make sure, that there's nothing relevant to your upcoming taxes, and if there is, obviously incorporate that.
Mm-hmm.
And then otherwise, just come up with a filing system. If it's stuff that you don't need, and it's got financial data, you want to shred it securely. Invest in a shredder. They're like $40. It's, for a cheap one, it's totally worth it. And if it's stuff that you do need, just maybe put together a filing system. I mean, I have the most outdated, ugly filing cabinet in the corner of my office. I mean, it's like a scene out of a bad, 80s, TV show where there's an office setting, but I don't care. It gets the job done, It just helps my papers stay organized. And the thing I want to emphasize, too, is that when it comes to tax documents or anything related to taxes, you want to keep your tax documents around for 3 years because that's basically the time frame the IRS has to come back to you and ask for more information about a prior return. So whether it's your property tax bill from, let's say, 3 years ago, or, your mortgage interest statement, or whatever it is, you need to keep that stuff around. So get your files organized. If you don't have room for a filing cabinet, or you don't want one, or you don't want a million papers lying around, another option, buy a scanner. Scan those documents in, save them electronically, save them to your computer, but also maybe invest whatever it costs, a few bucks a month for online cloud storage backup, just in case, your laptop dies. Let's say you spill hot coffee in the wrong spot, and all of a sudden, bam, there goes all your financial information from the last few years. You don't want that. But if you don't want stacks and stacks of paper either, do that scanning. What I do, Jeff, is I typically retain physical copies for a while, but I also, the really important documents that I know I couldn't easily go back and get again, I'll scan them as well. And it's a little bit of a chore, I'm not going to lie, scanning everything and figuring out where to save it and whatnot. But, it's an important thing to do. So I would definitely say that's item number 2 on your financial spring cleaning list.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. And, a lot of those documents that you're talking about, I mean, look, I sign up for paperless things too, but that doesn't stop the 401k administrator or someone from sending me documents. And I agree with scanning what you can. I always try to download documents, especially when I'm preparing my taxes, if I'm giving it to the CPA. I download it. I actually have a separate drive that's available on our Wi-Fi that I store our financial documents on, my wife and I. And so it's all backed up and available. But you're right. I mean, that stuff can, I'm thinking back, you think back to the traditional CPA's office, right, with stacks and stacks of paper. And, I don't think you want that because it's hard to find things, but maybe there's a filing system or a method to your madness if you do that. But I definitely think that scanning, keeping things electronically where you can, as long as it doesn't cost too much money, because, those megabytes and gigabytes add up. I think that makes a lot of sense for future retention because you never know, hey, what happened to my account? Did I not get interest credited to my account? Wait a minute, I got it over here, and you'd be able to kind of reconcile yourself.
Right, exactly. And Jeff, we'll do a quick item number 3, and This one is really quick, okay? And it ties into what I said earlier. Item number 3 on your spring cleaning list is get that tax return going. Get moving on your taxes. You have till April 15th. If you can't file by April 15th, you can request an extension. An extension will give you 6 months to submit your return, so you'll have till mid-October. However, if you owe the IRS any money from the previous tax year, that tax bill is still going to be due April 15th, so that if you wait to pay it in October, you're going to accrue 6 months of interest and penalties on whatever amount you owe the IRS. So I strongly recommend that everyone file a tax return by the actual tax deadline of April 15th. If you can't pay your tax bill in full, the IRS will work with you on an installment plan, but that way you at least know what you're dealing with and you can sort of get ahead of that. And then, of course, if you do a refund also, you don't want to delay that money either. So, the sooner you file, the sooner you get your cash.
Or as I always say, why give the government an interest-free loan? They wouldn't do the same for you. Mari Backman, always a pleasure chatting with you. I'm excited. If I had a garage, I'd be out there spring cleaning. But it's a beautiful day here in Charlotte. But I think you gave us some good ideas. Maybe this weekend, while we're cleaning some things out and getting ready for that beautiful spring season, that spring fun outside, we can do our best to clean up our own finances. Great talking with you as always, Mari, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon. Thank you.
Sounds great. Bye.
Bye-bye. Welcome back. Now time to talk about technology. Joining us online, he's lead advisor and executive producer for 7 Investing. I'm talking about Daniel Klein. Dan, welcome back to the program. Great to have you this morning.
Hey there, Jeff. Greetings from sunny West Palm Beach.
Well, I'm glad things are sunny. And you know what? Things are sunny here in Charlotte, North Carolina, but not as sunny. We're only 56 degrees today. What is it down there?
Actually, it's like only in the mid 60s right now, but I think that's a one-day anomaly. I think we get back to the 80s pretty quickly.
Okay. Well, I hope that you get to the 80s. I hope we get to the 80s, and I hope people up in the Northeast and parts of this country get to be warmed up. Sorry, my phone was going off, Dan. I don't know if you picked up on that, but
I did a little bit, not a problem.
I'm a very popular person. It's probably someone looking for me to pay a bill. Okay, so Dan, I know you want to talk about a couple things. Let's talk about some deep fakes, though, that are reanimating maybe some deceased relatives. What can you tell us there?
Yeah, so there was a lot of news attention this week about some videos online that appeared to be Tom Cruise, but were not Tom Cruise. And Tom Cruise is obviously not dead, but technology is so good that they can now basically say, okay, like Jeff Snyder doesn't want to be in my video. I'm going to take some pictures of him and put him in my video anyway. And obviously there are some legal issues. If you're Tom Cruise or someone famous, your likeness may have some copyrights and other things attached to it. But there's all sorts of nefarious things we could do. Like imagine a video plea from Jeff to Jeff's mom saying, oh my God, I'm being held hostage. Can you send the ransom money to this bank routing number? And I'm being a little silly here, but imagine okay, I'm really mad at you, so I'm going to make an embarrassing deepfake of you. Now, obviously, you and I can't do this. This is still pretty high-end technology, but we're moving to a world where it might be something accessible, and there's a lot of dangers. And this is going to touch off, I think, an entire whole new set of laws where realistically I need to own me. I mean, you and I are both somewhat public people. We wouldn't want someone copying our likenesses, our mannerisms, and then going on TikTok and doing videos telling people to buy GameStop stock. Like, there's a lot of things that could go wrong, even with relatively very minor celebrities such as ourselves, and even people who aren't famous. There's a lot of no good that could happen here, and I do think the law is behind on this, and it's going to have to catch up very quickly.
It's interesting that you bring this up because when I'm talking to clients, one of the things that we do on the network is whoever partners with us can use the content. And I always joke around and say, as long as you don't alter the message so that I'm saying you've got the greatest, I think you have good products, but, I'm not here to endorse anybody. But you bring up a really good point, Dan, in terms of your intellectual property. And your intellectual property is what's in your brain, what you've created, but it's also your person. And this is, we've kind of crossed that threshold. And you look at some of the CGI. You and I are big Star Wars buffs. You look at what they did with Carrie Fisher, both in The Rise of Skywalker and, the Rebel movie. What's that movie? Rogue One. And then they did with Grand Moff Tarkin, Peter Cushing, right? They were able to recreate him and Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian, right? So they were able to use those likenesses. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, a little different because though in some of those cases, not Peter Cushing, but in the Mark Hamill and the Carrie Fisher case, they used their likenesses when they were still alive. They de-aged them. They were willing participants
Yep.
there.
Yep.
With Peter Cushing, now his estate had to give some sort of permission, but he couldn't say. And we're going to see this. Like, do we need the 2023 Elvis performance? Now, there have been holograms and things that are clearly, fakes or ways to sort of bring back the dead in perhaps appropriate ways. But could we put out new videos where it's literally Elvis and it looks like Elvis, it looks like it's 1973, and he's saying, "Hey, I'm alive, come search for me." Like, we really need to control what can happen here. And I'll say it, like, I don't want someone else having rights to having use of my likeness. And if I'm a celebrity, there might be situations where I say, okay, you can recreate me for this. Like, we want young Tom Cruise to star in this commercial, and Tom Cruise can sign off on that and sign off on the dialogue, and that could be okay. But this is a really dangerous, slippery slope, and it's one thing to have like a few seconds of fill-in to make Princess Leia appear in a new Star Wars movie in a flashback or whatever it is, if her daughter, if her family is okay with that. It's a total other thing when this is in the hands of people who could use it to violate your privacy. I mean, look, your face, we've had these sort of scams with phone things. You get a call from your grandson saying he's in Mexico and he's kidnapped and he needs you to send money. Like, that's been an ongoing scam. But imagine if it's a video call and it looks like your grandson or your grandma or whatever it is. The ability here for things to be sort of really go off the rails fast are very strong. And my concern is, I don't think government has ever had the ability to stay ahead of technology.
No.
We've seen this with scams all over the place. So I'm not entirely sure. I've called for this a lot of times. I think the technology industry needs to do a better job with self-regulation. And obviously, once technology exists, they can't stop rogue actors from using it for bad things, but they could set standards. Look, SAG-AFTRA, the union for actors, has standards for how likenesses can be used. I think we're going to need that on a very deep societal basis for what someone is allowed to do. Like, if I walk into a concert, it usually says like, this gives us the right to use your likeness. Meaning, if like I appear in a background shot, cheering on Bruce Springsteen, I can't sue and say I didn't sign a release. But what if I'm sitting there with my arms folded looking bored, and for the concert video they change it so I'm all excited and screaming and I'm waving my arms around here on this non-visual podcast. um, but I do think there's going to need to be more than just boilerplate for how we deal with this.
Dan, what's the underlying technology here? Is this the AI, artificial intelligence? What does this? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, there's some AI involved there. The ability to render faster is just a process of computer power.
Yeah.
Like, so previously you might have been able to painstakingly, who was it? The Singing in the Rain guy was inserted back into a commercial
Fred Astaire?
many years ago.
Yeah,
Fred
Fred
Astaire.
Astaire. Yeah.
And that probably cost like millions of dollars because the computer processing. I mean, you've rendered video, Jeff. It's gotten faster over time. And what I'm talking about is when you produce a video, and then you have to spit it out to whatever platforms you're going to air. On a computer, it takes a reasonable amount of time, depending on how powerful your computer is, to sort of generate that video. I work on a MacBook Pro, and if I'm like spitting out like a 10, 12-minute interview I did, it might take 5 or 6 minutes to go through all that processing. Well, if you're talking the unbelievable computing going into rendering, a fake person, the essentially supercomputer level you need to do that made that very expensive and very inaccessible. That's no longer the case when there's all sorts of easy ways for people to access very high amounts of computer power. And even just my MacBook, which maybe 3 years ago might have taken an hour to render 10 minutes of video, now does it, 500 times faster. So the world is just getting better, and it allows for a lot more chicanery.
I think you're right, and you're right. Government will never be able to keep up. They have a hard time doing the things they're supposed to do, and they're doing a lot more. But you're right. There's definitely going to have to be some self-policing, I think, going on here. All right, Dan, let's switch gears. Talk about we're talking about wearables now, and there's a new Best Buy Health service for the Apple Watch for older adults. I guess.
So
am I an older adult?
We're not quite there yet. I
Okay.
am wearing an Apple Watch, and I do use it for health reasons, but it's not those health reasons. So I think health is the new frontier. I believe strongly in the Apple Watch. We saw this week. Gatorade is selling a single-use patch, where you wear it while you exercise, and then at the end it tells you, hey Jeff, you're short on potassium, you're 16 ounces of liquid short. By the way, you should go buy a Gatorade. Like, but I'm sure it's not that blatantly tied in.
Probably.
But we have all of this information. So what Best Buy is doing is they bought a health company a few years ago, and they sell standalone products that is similar to the old Life Alert. Remember, I've fallen and I can't get up, and you push a button
Yep.
and somebody comes to get you. Well, now they're selling a service, a $19.99 a month service, starts at $19.99 a month, that integrates to the Apple Watch. And why is that important? Because you and I'm 47. I think you're a couple years older than
Yeah, I'll
me.
be 49
Uh,
in 2 months.
so we're heading into that age where it's not crazy to think, okay, we might be at risk of certain things. And I don't want to wear a Life Alert bracelet, but if I could pay $20 a month and my Apple Watch could all of a sudden, contact a doctor or an ambulance, God forbid, or monitor more of my vitals, or, give me access to, oh, hey, Dan, looks like, your heart rate's high today. Let's get you on quickly with a nurse to talk about what might be going on. All of those things might be much more palatable to our generation through an Apple Watch than they would be through an old person's health device. So this is really Best Buy teaming with Apple, and there are some discounts associated if you buy an Apple Watch to use this. And it's really the tip of the iceberg for the next generation. I've talked about this a lot, but pretty soon, I'd say within the next 2 or 3 years, your watch plus your phone are basically going to be a doctor. My brother wears, I forget exactly what it's called, but it doesn't even have a face. It's just a band he wears that measures his sleep, measures his activity, everything, and gives him pretty massive amounts of data about what he could do differently. I think we're going to see that as almost a default, where Jeff, your watch is going to tell you, oh, hey, Jeff, you only slept about 6 hours today. Maybe, modify your workout and don't push it as hard. Or hey, Dan, I noticed, you just took in 24 ounces of caffeine, and your resting heart rate's now 88 instead of 68. Like, maybe cut back on that. I think we're going to see a lot of that. And I will say it has to get better, because I do, I sort of obsessively see my heart rate on my phone, and it can sometimes lead to overanalysis, where it's like, okay, my resting heart rate for the day is 68, but why am I at 84 right
Mm.
now? Well, maybe I just ate something and you're digesting, your heart rate goes up for that. Maybe just I read something exciting. Like, we do need to balance sort of like, what's the information that could help you? Telling you, hey, you're 18 ounces of water short, so in the next hour you should drink a bottle of water. That's useful information. Telling you, something that may or may not be scary, that might be better transmitted to a doctor who can, or even an AI program that can analyze this. But our ability to watch things like heart attacks and strokes and blood oxygen levels. I mean, my watch can check my blood oxygen level, which has never been that useful because my blood oxygen level's always been fine. But what if it wasn't? So I think Best Buy is starting to roll this out, and we're going to see this from Best Buy. We're going to see it directly from Apple. We're going to see it from Amazon. I mean, if we're seeing it from Gatorade, we're going to see it from just about everybody going forward.
Dan, one of the things that I have seen is, or reading about, I should say, is those temporary tattoos. I know you and I both don't wear temporary tattoos, but that technology or that ability to do that is kind of giving way to some enhanced wearables where they can almost the same application process put a wearable on you to do certain things, and it's probably not right around the corner, but it's something that probably might be something of interest to people out there, and in terms of getting and gathering information.
Jeff, I have a life-size Snoopy across my entire chest temporarily, so this is not. No, I'm teasing a little bit, but
A
yeah,
life-size Snoopy. That's very cool.
no, I'm kidding completely. But yeah, your ability to use tattoo-like technology to, we're seeing things. I'm sure you've seen the commercials. The days when diabetics have to stick their fingers are largely over. Your ability to wear sort of temporary monitoring devices that are unobtrusive, it's all very common, and you're going to see them get smaller. You're going to see them get better. I've talked a lot about this. Like, how far are we from my watch being able to analyze my sweat? And, we're both people who work out. I know that beginning of my workout yesterday, which was late in the day as opposed to early in the day, we did some ab exercises and I started to cramp up. And it's theoretically possible that it's because we haven't done that exercise in a while, but it's much more likely that I was just like a couple of bottles of water in deficit because it was late in the day, and I'd just been on air, and I try to limit how much liquid I take in while recording shows for obvious reasons. And I think our ability to sort of monitor that in real time is going to come. I don't even want to say within our lifetime, but within like the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. A lot of change going on. Just going back to the deep fake thing for a second, people can use data privacy. We talk about it all the time on the show. I'd like to see regulators get ahead of some of these advances, but you can't always, rely on people to police themselves, right? I mean, I think there's obviously a room here for regulation, not over-regulation, but regulation. But it always concerns me that privacy angle is concerning me more and more, and not necessarily related to what we're talking about. But
It's a concern on the health front too, because it is one thing if my doctor has access to, say, literally my heart rate records and says, "Hey Dan, you're doing a great job. I think you need a little more cardio, but you've improved in these ways." And that's great if my doctor has it. What if my employer has it?
yeah,
And my employer says, "You know what? We have 3 employees, and boy, this employee's health risks, like, his blood pressure's terrible, his weight's bad. Hey, let's get rid of him and pretend it's a layoff for economic reasons." You've got to be really careful with where this stuff goes. And I'll go back to the deep fakes. Think of something innocuous, like Cameo is really big now, where you could get like some failed American Idol, contestant to say happy birthday to you for $60. Well, what if someone does it and for $100, it's Katy Perry says happy birthday to you, but it's not Katy Perry. It's a deep fake that somebody set up. I'm pretty sure actual Katy Perry wouldn't like that, and that it's probably illegal, but really difficult to enforce. So we're going to need companies, Cameo has to enforce that it isn't fake Katy Perry. Now, if you're a lookalike and you identify as a lookalike, that's different. You could hire a Tom Cruise impersonator to come to your party, but there are some legalities. You can't pretend it's actually Tom Cruise. Like, so this is all really tricky, and technology is only going to make it harder.
yeah, I agree, Dan. Really interesting topics. I feel like we not only talk about some of the newest consumer innovations on the show, but we talk about some of these ethical or moral issues that I think are really going to be challenging our society and for the foreseeable future. Dan Klein, it is always, always a pleasure chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to having you back on the program where we can actually see you and Mr. Snoopy across your chest on this coming Tuesday. Have a great rest of the weekend. We'll talk to you again soon.
Jeff, nobody would need to see that.
Oh, take care, Dan. Bye-bye.
I'll see you. Bye.
Welcome back. Now we're going to talk real estate. Joining us on the line, he's the real estate reporter for Dow Jones Market Watch. Let's welcome Jacob Passy. Jacob, great to talk to you as always this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
I am glad to be here.
Yeah, I hope you had a great week. I know, sometimes the weather hasn't been really convenient for all of us, but I know it's kind of a chill there. But hopefully spring will be sprung, and you will get some very nice weather soon.
Yeah, we're seeing it creep in slowly but surely, which is a relief. So we can spend more time outside and less time in our apartments.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. So, Jacob, what's top of mind for you this? I know you write tons of articles each and every week, and you're doing tons of reporting. What's top of mind when it comes to real estate this week?
Yeah, so I think first off, you and I always talk about interest rates and
Yep.
whatnot, and briefly, don't want to take up too much time discussing this, but it was a pretty notable week because the average rate for the 30-year fixed rate mortgage, the benchmark mortgage rate, went back above 3%. It's now at 3.02%.
Mm.
So as listeners may recall, fell below 3% back in July and has remained below that level since then. And that was a record low, and it kept hitting record low after record low. But for the past few weeks, in response to what we've been seeing in bond markets, where yields are quickly rising because of concerns about related to inflation, how the economy is going to recover, et cetera, that's been pushing bond yields higher. And mortgage rates, as I have mentioned before, are roughly correlated with bond yields. There's definitely a relationship there. It's not as strong as it necessarily used to be. The spread between the two has grown throughout the pandemic, but their mortgage rates are also on the up. So it's something to keep in mind, especially if you're one of the folks that's looking to buy a home this spring, as many people are. It's important to keep in mind when you're calculating how much you can afford, that mortgage rates have gone up quite a bit since the start of the year, and look like they might go up even more potentially.
So what is that? Did I miss the boat? If I'm going to go to buy a house, and did I miss the down the bottom of the market in terms of interest rates, Jacob? Is that what we're saying under
So
the?
you might have, unfortunately. I mean, never say never, and any economist you talk to will say that they are more likely to get their forecast for rates wrong than they are to get it right.
Like the weatherman.
Right, exactly. So last year, before COVID, they were expecting rates to go up last year, and then look what happened. So there's no telling what will happen, and to be sure, if there's some sort of big downturn in the economy, we got the jobs numbers this Friday, and unemployment improved the slightest bit, and hopefully that will continue. But let's say there's more long-term unemployment, things like that give investors pause. That will reflect in mortgage rates. I don't know if they'll drop to record lows again, but they might drop below 3% again. And in general, though, I think it's important to keep in mind, how ridiculously low rates already are. I mean, the 20-year average is around 5% for the 30-year fixed rate mortgage, so we're well below that. And there was actually an interesting investor's note from UBS this week where one of their analysts, pointed out that, because of how low rates already were, most home buyers, I should say, will be able to withstand, a pretty significant increase in rates without it affecting affordability too much. I'm sure there are going to be people at the margins who are certainly heavily affected, but for, the average home buyer, they can probably withstand what UBS said. They could probably withstand an interest rate increase from the bottom of between 75 and 100 basis points. And we're not there yet. We're not 75 basis points above where mortgage rates were when they hit their last record low earlier this year. So there's positives. Also, if rates continue to go up, that will help slow the pace of home price appreciation because of there's a relationship there, and that would be good news for home buyers. So I wouldn't worry too much yet, but just something to keep in mind as you're looking ahead and calculating what you can afford to don't factor in rates dropping super low again. Maybe give yourself a cushion if they go up.
Really good advice. And I know a lot of people, as we talked about, are out there looking and hunting around for houses, and the inventory hasn't been there. Jacob, a couple stories. I follow you on a regular basis because you write great stories, and one of our great contributors. I know you wrote a piece on the mortgage. If you refinance your mortgage, how could it affect your taxes? And we did at the top of the show, we had a conversation with someone around personal finance. And we've talked to her about taxes, but how might your refinancing of your mortgage in 2020 impact your taxes?
Yeah, so great question, and I had a sneaking suspicion you would ask about it, so I actually pulled up the story before we started this conversation.
Yeah, see, and before you, I just want to let the audience know, I always leave it up to the guests to talk about what they want to talk about, but that doesn't mean that I won't go and I read all the guests, and so therefore I like to things may trigger things. But sorry, Jacob, go ahead. Just a little interruption.
No, it's a great question, and it's an important story, I think. So I think the first thing to keep in mind when you're looking at your taxes, which I'm sure most people are aware of, is the Republican tax legislation a few years ago significantly increased the standard deduction. It basically doubled it. So if you were itemizing in the past, you might not be anymore. And then, when you look at it from the mortgage interest deduction perspective, given that most people refinancing last year were refinancing to such low rates, you probably have to have a pretty expensive home to be able to be paying enough in mortgage interest to make itemizing worthwhile, given the larger standard deduction. So that's just one thing to keep in mind off the bat. Of course, though, in certain markets across the country, you're going to probably be able to take advantage of it. The average home price in places like San Diego being much higher than the average home price in Iowa or Chicago or something like that. So that all being said, the GOP tax bill did include some changes to the mortgage interest deduction. They didn't get rid of it, but they reduced the amount of debt you could deduct the interest on. So originally, back before 1987, you could deduct all the interest. But then in 1987, they changed it to only the interest on up to $1 million in mortgage debt. And now the new tax legislation from 2017 changed it to only the mortgage interest paid on up to $750,000 in debt. The complicated thing here is there's an extent to which you might be grandfathered in even if you refinanced last year. So basically, the idea being that, the debt relates back to when you initially bought the home, like the amount that you can deduct on.
Mm-hmm.
So if you bought a home pre-2017 and then refinanced, let's say you bought it in 2005, the 2005 is the date they're using to judge, the amount of mortgage debt you can deduct on. But there's a catch there, which is, if you go above, you can't go above the balance on the loan when you refinanced. So what that means, or the original balance on the loan when you refinance. Let's look at an example where you originally had bought a home for $700,000, and then back in 2005, and then you refinanced this year and took out, you did a cash out refi, and between building up equity and the rising value of home prices nationwide, you were able to cash out $800,000, in a cash out refinance, and you got that extra, $100,000. Well, you might be thinking, well, I bought in 2005, so the $1 million limit applies to me. It doesn't. It applies because you went over the original balance. It's complicated. Mm-hmm. Another thing to keep in mind is you're only able to deduct mortgage interest used to acquire, build, or improve a home. So that means buying, building, or doing a home renovation. So if you get a cash out refinance, they're going to want to look at how you used the proceeds of the loan to determine what is eligible for the deduction. So let's say you cashed out, you did the original balance on your loan plus $100,000. You might still be below $750,000, but if you use those $100,000 to buy a new car or to fund your child's college education rather than improving your home, it will be exempt from the deduction. Mm. So just, when you do a cash out refinance, it's a great tool, especially with interest rates as low as they are right now. Granted, you want to make sure you keep enough equity in your home that you have a cushion if home prices fall, et cetera, given that many people were underwater last recession during the Great Recession. So I add that as a caution, but it's a great tool. But just keep in mind, if you were planning to rely on being able to deduct your mortgage interest, depending on how you use the proceeds of the refinance, you might have some limitations there.
Yeah, just hearing you describe that in great detail just makes me think that I need, if I were in that situation, I need a CPA, or I'd hope that the software tool that I use had all the rules written out so that I could properly explain that, because this is an example why you need documentation. I mean, you've got to be able to explain all these things that you're doing, and I hope people who are doing that are documenting it.
Totally, and also lots was going on last year with mortgage companies, so always a good idea to cross check. You'll get documents.
Oh, Jacob.
Sorry, I muted myself.
Oh,
So you'll get documents from your mortgage lender. You'll get an IRS form from your mortgage lender. I forget which code it is. That shows how much you paid in mortgage interest. So that will be the basis for your calculations for the deduction. But always good to double check that if there are any errors. And yeah, like you just said, very important to work with a CPA, especially if you're itemizing these days, given that you really need to cross a higher threshold in order for it to, make financial sense.
Yeah, well, the complexities of the tax code necessitate that you are aware of all the changes each and every year because there are always changes. Jacob Passy, pleasure talking to you as always about real estate, taxation. We even talked about saving for college, buying a car in some way, shape, or form. Always great talking with you. Have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Talk soon. Take care.
Bye-bye. Welcome back. Now time to take a look at what's going on Capitol Hill. Joining us, of course, for this wonderful segment are David Levine, Kevin Walsh. Both are principals with Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C., and they are affectionately known as the Legal Eagles. David, Kevin, thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, thanks for having us on. It's always good to be on the show. And, last week we were missing David, and it's always good when he participates. So, you've got the two of us back in action.
Great. David, what's top of mind this week? Oh,
Well,
you have a retort?
You say that we're affectionate, so I kind of want to roll on my back and let you rub my belly while we're at it too.
Maybe I meant effectively known. I don't know. What's the right word? Did I use the wrong word there?
No, I'm totally
affectionately known as. I thought that was appropropriate. I don't know.
David is rapidly venturing to the illegal Eagles. Let's get back.
Go ahead, David.
Jeff is the one who started there.
That's my
All right.
fault.
So what are we going to talk about this week? Well, I'm going to preview something. We have a new mini segment at the end of our segment today, where Kevin is going to talk about something essential and important. But before we get there,
when you have an 8-minute segment, they want a mini segment at the end. That's ideal.
Well, Kevin,
for our 14-part series.
Hey, Kevin, one question in 37 parts. If Rodney Dangerfield can do it in Back to School, we can do it too. But anyway, so what we're really going to talk about, rather than Kevin burning more time as he's prone to do already, as we've seen, is what
Dilly-dally David.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, moving on, because this is more important. Right now, by the time you listen to this, Congress may have passed the next wave of COVID relief stimulus bills, however you want to call it. Depending on your side of the aisle, you may say it's wasteful spending, and on the other side, you may say it's the best thing since sliced bread. No, we're not going to get into the middle of that. But one of the things that comes up when you're doing legislation what you do is you are looking at legislation and you look at like a 10-year budget window. And I'm not going to get into the wonkiness of reconciliation. I'll just say you look at a 10-year budget window. And when you look at a 10-year budget window, you're trying to balance the economic impacts of a bill that spends a lot of money, you're always looking for nickels, dimes, quarters in the sofa cushions. And one way that that's done is people often look to retirement savings. Why? Because retirement savings, in some ways, is the perfect budget balancer. Because if you say, I'm going to accelerate how money is taxed as it goes into retirement accounts, but we'll let it be taxed it won't be taxed again way in the future. The way that Congress generally does its budgeting, it says, let's look at the next 10 years and see what this law means to our budgets over 10 years. After 10 years, we don't really look at it. So that means if you say, I am going to either reduce the amount that can go into retirement plans so that more people have more taxable income in the next 10 years, or B, you say, for instance, in 2017, you make everything go Roth, what happens with that is that you get more revenue up front in the federal government, which makes spending bills look less expensive, but you can have long-term effects. Like the Roth discussion would have been that, we would have gotten a lot more revenue up front because everybody would have paid taxes, but then Roth distributions wouldn't be taxed again in the future in most cases. Here, what they proposed in the spending bill was to cap cost of living adjustments. In other words, the rise in the limits on how much you can contribute to plans to 401k plans in a given year. Why do we care? Well, it's because everybody says, not a lot of people don't max out. That's true. There are people who don't. But I refer to this as the great, and I mean this in a positive way. America likes to say middle class for everything, but it is a great middle. For there's a large portion of working Americans who are certainly not facing extreme poverty, but also they are not the ultra wealthy. And what happens is as their employers have phased out pensions, a lot of employers, especially big industrial companies, offer pretty rich employer contributions.
Mm-hmm.
But if you cap these contributions, it's these folks that aren't necessarily the super wealthy, but aren't certainly at the bottom of the pay ladder. Their ability to save gets crunched if they start hitting these limits. And thankfully, that came out of the bill, as we understand it, as part of this process right now, and we'll see where the final version is. But it shows you how retirement isn't always about retirement. Sometimes retirement can be, in a sense, a funding source for other items. And this is a topic that has come up in the past and will continue again as we turn back towards austerity. That was a high-level overview. Kevin.
It can be a bit of a rob Peter to pay Paul situation, because when we look at the retirement system, we essentially allow people to save so that the government doesn't have to step in to ensure dignified retirement. So when we see legislation that does things like cap the exclusion or limit the amount that people can save, it definitely raises some concerns that, we might be saving money today, but at what cost?
I think that's, Kevin, I know you and I joke, but that's an excellent comment. I wholeheartedly agree. But on that note, I was going to say, for our mini segment, I wanted to introduce our mini segment, our weekly tidbit from Kevin Walsh on missing participants.
Kevin, go ahead, Kev.
Thanks, David. I mean, I think we got to save some of these missing participant tips or best practices, as some may call them, until other weeks. I think this week talking about, people maxing out their savings is significant. Next week we can talk about connecting them with their savings in retirement.
Wow. Okay. So it's a cliffhanger, folks. That's the way that's the way to end the segment. So, folks, you hear it right. You heard it right here. We talked about capping retirement cost of living adjustments potentially, and now next week we're going to hear about missing participants. David, Kevin, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. It's a lot of fun. I mean, we had a lot of fun on this segment. Before, the audience didn't just get to hear that, but during as well. Gentlemen, great to talk to you. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, you too, Jeff. Bye.
Bye.
Well, that wraps up this episode of BRN Sunday. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, then drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, all in one place, check out our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow for BRN AM. I'll be joined by Michael Berman. He's a CPA with KBSTNM. We'll be talking, of course, taxes for 2020. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.